The radishes and the mustard greens that I planted into this bed inside the greenhouse about 2 weeks ago now are growing really, really nicely, and I haven't thinned them yet. And they really need it. They have their true leaves. They've started to set on a lot of growth, and it's now or never for thinning. So I thought I'd bring you guys along and I'd show you just what I do for thinning and talk to you a little bit about, you know, my logic behind doing it. My preferred way to grow is by directly seeding seeds into the ground. I don't really want to do starts and put in the effort of babysitting them and then needing to plant them into the garden after they've grown. If I could just plant them right where they're going to continue to grow, it's going to save me a lot of time and effort, and it's also not going to really have any consequences for the quality of my harvest, or I mean really even how soon I can harvest. In most crops, there are a few exceptions. So if I can save myself the time and the labor, then you know, I'm going to do it. These radishes here, I've actually thinned these out, and they look really tight, they look really dense together, but my thinking on leaving them as close as I've left them is this crop is actually going to get harvested out as smaller radishes. They're also a longer cylindrical radish, so they don't need quite as much space to do that, you know, big round bulb that other radishes would do. So I've thinned them so that the radishes are only, you know, about an inch, you know, sometimes even half an inch apart. Here's a good example. These are quite close. This has a bit more space, but you can see there is a bit of a gap between this one and the next one. So this one has some space to kind of grow over this way without crowding each other. Because I want to pick these radishes as baby radishes, I don't have to be quite as accurate in my spacing when I go to thin. And the same goes with my mustards. These mustards I actually want to crop out a lot sooner than what an entire mustard crop would take time-wise. So because of that, these don't need to be thinned as much if I was going to just have like a full grown mustard plant, but you can see spaces like this where it's just there's way too many plants in there. These are never going to be able to thrive with this kind of spacing, and I really need to get in there and do some work to help these out. So here on these radishes that I haven't thinned yet, you can kind of see this little cluster of radishes right here. There's 3 in here, and they're all quite crowded, but then I also have a bit of a gap here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out one of these, and then I'm going to leave these 2, you know, tighter than you probably would want, but this one's going to have space to grow this way, and it's going to keep it from crowding it quite as much. Then I'm also going to go through here, and I'm going to see what else I have. So here's another cluster of a lot of radishes. One of the healthiest looking ones here is this center one, but if I pull out this, it's actually going to create space for all 3 of these, and then I'm going to leave those 3 in there. There. Now they all have some space to grow, and then hopefully I'll be able to get some actual roots out of those, and then these I can bring inside and have some radish microgreens as a salad. I'm familiar with the radishes that I'm thinning here, so I know how much I can get away with when it comes to tightly spacing my crops. But if you've never grown your crop before and you don't know how big it's going to get, the seed packets will always have some references for what your spacing can be. I usually don't listen to the spacing on the seed packets. I plant things a lot tighter than the recommended, and usually my general rule is I will plant things about half the space of the recommended amounts. And doing that, I find it doesn't necessarily stunt my crops, and I mean it could potentially, in my experience. It hasn't been stunting my crops enough that I'm going to give it the extra space. But yeah, I find that planting it that little bit tighter gets just a little bit extra for me, and I've had really good luck with it. So make sure to experiment. You know, you could always try if you're growing, you know, like I have an entire row here of radishes. If I wanted to do an experiment to find out, you know, just exactly what is the most ideal space, I could even plant some of these with extra space and then leave the other ones tightly planted and then come back and assess my crops at the end of the, you know, the growing period when I go to harvest them and see which spacing actually did work out the best. So, you know, you don't always have to follow the rules, but it's not a bad idea to do those experiments for yourself. Here's a spot where I definitely didn't do as good of a job at seeding. There's just way too many plants in here. This is a good example of why it's not a bad idea to take your time and to be a little bit cautious about your seeds when you're actually planting out, because putting extra seeds into a space only just creates work for you. You know, there's the expense to the seeds that you used, and then there's also the, you know, labor expense of having to come back in and do the thinning. My guess in this patch here, because this spot's extra bad compared to the other spots, but my guess is maybe this is where I finished seeding a row and then started seeding another row, and I actually double seeded in the same place. But yeah, so you can see, like, as I go through here, you know, I'm still leaving these quite close because I'm going to be picking these as baby greens, because I don't want to leave these in for very long. I only want to give these, you know, another 3 weeks tops before I want to crop them out and be thinking about planting in my summer crops. But with this amount of spacing, they should be able to get big enough that I will get some harvest off of them. Thinning can be really difficult, especially in the first couple of years that you're gardening. You know, you pull out all these plants that you put in all this effort to, you know, to grow all these seeds that you'd paid for, and you basically just, you know, turn it into nothing. You throw it in the compost. I mean, I'm gonna eat those, but and it's hard when you're at this point in the garden to really see the use of doing the thinning. It really feels like you're working against yourself, but it's really important, and it is gonna, you know, create a better crop and a larger harvest in the long run. So yeah, you gotta do it. One of the tricks that I use if it's getting just a little bit overwhelming for me is I'll go through and I'll do an initial thin. I'll just get rid of the stuff that I'm like, okay, yeah, these definitely too crowded, and then I'll come back to it the next day and be like, okay, now that I've thinned out the bulk, what can go, like what's going to create the proper spacing. And so that's my little trick for if you get overwhelmed with it. It definitely is nice to finally be out in the garden on a day that feels like a true garden, true, you know, spring summer day. I even got shorts on. So that definitely is exciting for me. As disappointing as thinning can feel because you're ripping out plants, it actually is exciting because it means your plants have finally grown big enough that you need to go and you need to give them some space so that they can grow even bigger. It means that you're well on your way to your plants actually producing something for you. So I'm excited. These are 2 weeks old, and I wouldn't be surprised if I'm actually going to be harvesting in another 2 weeks, so something to look forward to. So thank you for joining me on my greenhouse adventure today, and if you want to see these crops when they're ready, make sure to subscribe because I will be posting my first harvest of the season, which I know will be these, and it's not going to be long now. Have a good day.